what if the new winning was learning? What if the new winning was learning about somebody else's perspective, learning about them as a person, heart-based, or learning about ourselves as we engaged it?
Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Hey, Gut Plus Science listeners. Today's episode is on the topic of respectful disagreements. And my guest is known for being grounded in research, but combines humor, storytelling, maybe a little singing, actionable takeaways. So you see how aligned this guest is for the show already with Gut Plus Science, right? So Justin Jones-Fosu is the founder and CEO at Work Meaningful. Another direct alignment to like what we do at People Forward Network, meaningful work. Love this. He's the author of I Respectfully Disagree, How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World, The Inclusive Mindset, and Your Why Matters Now. Justin, welcome. So I'm so curious, how did this particular topic area become so important to you and an anchor to your work?
Yeah, so it actually started off with some of our sessions around inclusive mindset, and then I'll kind of kick it into a story because I think it'll be helpful. But as we were traveling around the world, just doing things, helping and make inclusive mindset shift a part of our everyday lives, I would always make this statement that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and still passionately pursue their humanity. And it was always like in the room, it's like, oh, no, you know, people would come up afterwards, they'd be like, I love that quote, but how do we do it? Or they would say, but what if they believe this? Right? And so working towards writing this book became a catalyst to answer the question about how do we do it? And what if they believe this? And as I started working on it, it actually harkened to a story in my life that worked through respectful disagreement and not realizing that the true impact that respectful disagreement has in our lives. And so in 2019, I was going to go back to Ghana. I'm a dual citizen in both Ghana and the United States, and my dad had moved back there. And I was going to go confront my dad because my dad wasn't in my life growing up. My parents divorced at 4. I would see my dad every the weekend, then one weekend a month. And then there's sometimes 2 or 3 years where I wouldn't see and or hear from my dad for myriad reasons. And when I was younger, it didn't bother me as much. But when I got older, like I would sometimes just pull off to the side of the road and just start weeping. And so 2019, going to go confront my dad, Will Smith style. Now, before your listeners think I'm talking about the Chris Rock version, I'm not talking about the slap. No, not that version. That's not respectful disagreement. But I was going to go and confront him, almost Will Smith style from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And there's an awesome episode in that, the TV show where his dad comes into life. His dad left, didn't tell Will. Will's like, it's cool. I'm going to get married without him, have kids without him. And when most people have no idea what's an unscripted moment, he falls into Uncle Phil's arms and he's like, why did he love me? And so I was going to do that. But because I have a really good therapist and a great leadership Charlotte cohort that challenged me from instead of going to confront my dad to going and hearing his story. A later participant summed it up better than I could. She said, Justin, they helped you turn a confrontation into a conversation. And I realized as I listened to a story and I engaged, I was a student, I asked more questions, I found common ground, and I agreed to respect him. I still shared my truth and love, but it led me to forgive him. Now, what I didn't realize on the other side of forgiveness was a whole aspect of my heritage that I've been holding back all these years because he represented that. And I was challenged to do something different. And so I tell people, when people say, well, why do we need to respectfully disagree? Right? Outside of the obvious reasons to the workplace, collaboration and teamwork and creativity, it's like, you have no idea what's on the other side of respectful disagreement, as I didn't as well. And so this has been a great story and journey for me in learning why respectful disagreement is super important.
Well, I just want to say thank you for your work. We are in the U.S., both you and I recording today in the United States. And, of any time that I can ever remember in my 40 plus years of living, this is so needed. Like just where we are all at in the world and how we treat each other and respect the come-froms. And I always like to be reminded on, we never know the life journey of someone else until we've truly taken the time to understand and to listen. And gosh, the way we treat each other sometimes, it's like, well, thank you so much for your work. I can't wait to dive in today to the 5 pillars of bridging the divide. But before we get there, I like to walk us up the staircase, if you will. And the first thing I want to prepare in us learning these 5 pillars is, what is the coaching that you would give us on the mindset shift so that we as leaders can really, be at this foundational level of coming to the table to embrace what we're about to learn? So that mindset shift needed to be able to apply these teachings.
I'll give 2 things. One is that respectful disagreement is always a choice. It's a choice. And a lot of times people, and we'll dive, I'm sure, deeper into what respect is and the definitions, because we had to redefine that based upon the foundation of where we were going with this work. But it's always a choice. It's not always an easy choice, but it's always a choice, which leads me to the second piece. And that when we think about mindset, it encompasses who you are. And so one of the things that we challenge people is that most people start doing some of this conflict resolution stuff or disagreement, all this kind of stuff in the moment, like when they're in the disagreement. But our challenge is make this a part of your everyday life. And what we mean by that is the first pillar is challenge your perspective, which happens before any disagreement even occurs. And so one of the things that we encourage people to do in challenge your perspective is intentionally putting yourself in positions of learning about things that you disagree with. My mom used to take us to events that we disagreed with. And I'd be sitting in the audience like, Mom, why are we here? We don't even agree with this. But what she was doing was just planting these seeds of humanity in us to see that even in our disagreements, there's still a human being that's worthy of value, dignity, and respect. And so how do you challenge your perspective? I'm glad you asked that question. So 2 ways. One is that when challenging leaders to move from an open door policy to an out the door policy. And an open door implies, I'm here if you need me. It's a very passive approach. My door is always open. We even have virtual open door office hours now. I'll be on Microsoft Teams from 3 to 5, Monday through Thursday, right? And we were saying, like, what if we move to an out the door where we go out intentionally to hear the stories of our people, our community, our family members, and other people around us? Now, you may say, Justin, I'm too busy. I have a lot going on. Like, how do I do that? Well, one thing that we do is what we call the Circles of Grace Challenge. And the Circles of Grace Challenge is simply every 6 to 12 months, I go to events, experiences, or are engaged with people in either which I don't know a lot about and or I disagree with. And I go asking 2 questions. What did I learn about myself? And what did I learn about the people and experiences and or events as I engaged them? Now, why is that important? Because the more we build those muscles, the easier it is to have disagreements with people, because it's not the first time we're confronted with alternative viewpoints or perspectives that differ than our own. And I think doing that consistently has helped me to navigate many disagreements in today's world.
That's so good. And I just jotted down some notes about the power of some of the basics, like listening, right? And I think we can all get better at that, right? It's a conscious effort. The other is reflection. So last week I was on a leadership retreat, completely unplugged. Half of our week was reflection. And most of this stuff is inside us, right? Like, it's, if we just spend the time to take a look and do this inner deep dive, like, it's here, but we fill our calendar so much, right? Like, there's no time to even do the reflection. So just those simple yet powerful things of practicing better listening and spending time in reflection. You mentioned a couple minutes ago that you took time to work on defining. And I always love to do that before we go into like these 5 pillars and all of that. How do you define respect?
Yeah. So before I dive into that, I have to share a disagreement. I don't know if you're ready for it. Your listeners may be mad at me. So I respectfully disagree with Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul herself, in her amazing song. You remember, R-E-S-P-E-C-K, find out what it means. And I don't know what she said after that. Anyway.
Hey, I did give a heads up. There might be some singing on this. Did you see that?
You called it right. Those are your gut and science. Is how much respect? Do you remember how much respect she said we needed?
I'm trying to think of this. So help me out here.
Yep. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I disagree. We need a whole lot of it today. And as we dove deeper into the conversation about respectful disagreement, we started asking people, right? We started having conversation. What does respect mean to you? And we realized that respect and the definition of it is all over the place and how people define it. So we had to come to this kind of consensus of how we define respect. And so we created what we call the 10 characteristics of golden respect. Because we took what society viewed it, and then we repositioned it to what we call golden respect. Now, we're not going to go over through all 10, but there's 3 that really stood out. Number 1 is that you must earn respect. And we started asking the question, why? Well, where did this concept come from that you have to earn respect? That the golden respect is that everyone should be given value, dignity, and respect, period. It comes from our choice, right? Number 2 is that, well, I respect you because you're a leader. Yeah, you have the title, right? The person's title grants them respect. But golden respect is a person's humanity grants them respect. And the other one, number 3, is that, well, Justin, I heard, well, respect is a thing that as long as I can say that they lost my respect. And this is what we started to realize, that people were conflating the terms of respect and honor. And so when a person says that, I hold you in higher esteem and regard, no, you don't have to like the person. You don't have to like what they represent, what they believe, but you can still choose to respect them because they're a human being. And so respect is not honor. A person can't lose your respect. You choose to give it to them or not. And so if we summed up all the 10 characteristics, it comes back down to what my mom challenged me all these years ago, is that every single person is worthy of value, dignity, and respect. And it's our choice to give it to them.
Another foundational learning here, just to remind ourselves, is the power of reframe. Even Aretha Franklin's, lyrics, sometimes we have those in our head and we're like, wait, but what am I singing? Right? We just really taking a step back to look at, like, everything you just said makes so much sense, and 100% agree. And I think leaders listening, they're like, okay, keep giving me more here. So when we look at the work that you do in meeting people where they are, as far as like the disagreements and how do we do this better, can you give some examples of when you say disagreements? I think sometimes we get in tunnel vision. Here's what a disagreement is. It's like an absolute blow up fight. Got the fists up. No, there's various forms of that. Can you just help us level set on disagreements?
Yeah, disagreements is as simple as having different perspectives or different approaches. And sometimes they're at extreme odds, and sometimes they're little things, right? It could be, what movie is the best? Oh, that's a disagreement. Who should take out the trash? That can be a disagreement. All the way to the most complex of issues, even today. And it's, could Leonardo DiCaprio have survived on that little plank of wood in Titanic, right? And it's the number 1 disagreement of all time. And so one of the things as we dive in is that our disagreements is just simply a difference of perspective. And you have those at work, you have those at home, you have those in our community with elections, conversations about politics, things about gun control and gun safety, women's rights, and all these things. And we have to ask the question consistently, is there a way that even in the midst of our disagreements, even when we vehemently disagree with someone's ideology, will we still choose to passionately pursue their humanity? And what does that passionately pursue mean? It means to be intentional. And because if we leave it to chance, it's unlikely it's going to happen. And so that's why we've created strategies and ways to help people to lean into intentionally pursuing people's humanity.
The word conscious keeps coming up for me. This is a conscious effort. It's this regular, present way of being. So before we dive into these 5 pillars, the other thing I wanted to ask is just really reflecting on this leadership retreat I did. Half the week was in reflection. Like, it is a lot of work to stay present as a conscious leader. Can you just talk about how that coincides, that internal work, working with the leaders that you do? This is not a, hey, let's come in, let's do this, all day, 1-day retreat or leadership executive roundtable. I mean, this is a consistent journey. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, anything that's a mindset requires consistency. So I've been doing this Toyota plant tour. We've been walking through the different manufacturing plants, Toyota. While there, I picked up on something. And I was talking about, my encouragement for people to get therapy. By the way, every single person that hears this, please consider therapy. I don't go to therapy because there's something wrong with me, even though my kids might say something different. but I go to therapy to keep things going right. And I picked up on this thing because in the manufacturing plant, safety is a big thing. And so I asked the question to the group. I was like, so tell me, is safety important to you? They're like, yes, absolutely. I was like, well, how often do you talk about safety? Like every day. Like, why? It's like, because we want to be able to have a safety culture. We want to have it built in as a normal habit of what we do. I was like, well, why is that part? Why don't you just talk about safety when an incident happens? And they're like, well, because we want to be preventative. And I was like, exactly. The role of being a conscious leader and consistently engaging in emotional intelligence, therapy, finding out how do we build stronger relationships and bonds, realizing that disagreement and conflict, healthy conflict, is actually a means for growth. It allows us to build it in as just a habit of what we do. And that's why a lot of our strategies and principles are not just, here's what you do when you're in the disagreement. There's a lot of great books and a lot of things about that, about deep breathing and taking a breath and pause and all that kind of stuff. There's some great stuff. But our work is a heart-based work, which it starts with how do you lean into it in terms of your stories, your feeling, even your past, and how your past has shaped who you are. I mean, that's one of the things that we love diving into, is asking, how did you see disagreement modeled for you? Because we tend to love to give people tools and tips and things, but we don't get to the heart of the issue, is that all of us are shaped by our context, our culture, our environment, and even how those things have been modeled. And we've heard people over and over again, it's like, I didn't see it. They took it behind closed doors. And so they didn't know how to operate in healthy conflict. Or we heard some people say that when I was younger, we were taught that children should be seen and not heard. And then they've taken that into the workplace with them. And so they keep the peace and they avoid disagreements because they just want to not rock the boat. And so these are the hard work and the consciousness that is required of leaders and everyday people to consistently grow in respectful disagreement.
I want to just comment on your nudge for a therapist. I've said so many times on this show, I don't know where I would be if at age, I think it was 16 when I got my first therapist. And then at 22, I hired my first coach. A coach and a therapist is like, how do you do life without that? You know, and a great support system, the people that we surround ourselves with. So just, you know, right now, there's so many people walking in isolation, disconnected, feeling alone. And if you don't have like those crucial relationships in your life, like, hey, there's the highest action item that you could take. The other thing is you talked about heart-based work. And I think we have to acknowledge that, you know, most people listening to Gut Plus Science, they're listening because they want to be a better leader. They want to create meaningful workplaces. But we also have to realize that there are some leaders out there that don't have the core of heart-based work, which is love and care, right? You have to love humans and you have to truly care about what you're doing. And there are a lot of leaders out there that don't. And this stuff will not apply unless that's at play, right? And you just hear people say sometimes it's like, but we have brought in all of this training and this coaching and whatever. I'm like, but if they don't love the people and care about this stuff, not going to work. So, but let's just assume that everybody here listening, we do have that love. We do have that care. Now let's walk through this methodology, the 5 pillars of bridging the divide. And I'm just going to play color learning with you.
Absolutely. I'll give it to macro and we can dive in deeper into the micros as you see fit. So we've surmised the 5 pillars from our conversations, qualitative, all that kind of stuff with people, the research, looking at books, different things, a lot of primary data as well. And we found that, let's be honest, there could have been 100 pillars, Nikki. One, it would have been a very long book that no one would have read. But 2, what we did is we found these 5 pillars that really rose to the top. And these 5 pillars have been helpful. I've used them. Workplaces have used them. People have used them. I've seen improvements in their disagreements towards more respect. Number 1, which was the last one we added, we initially was 4 pillars, but we found this was the most foundational one. And it's the one I mentioned earlier, and it's challenge your perspective. Because most of the work deals with when you're in the conflict. And challenging perspective helps us to engage before any conflict even occurs. Pillar number 2 is be the student, where we focus more on listening and learning rather than lecturing. And in a society, in a world where everybody has to win the debate, we said, what if the new winning was learning? What if the new winning was learning about somebody else's perspective, learning about them as a person, heart-based, or learning about ourselves as we engaged it? Pillar number 3 is cultivate your curiosity, where we focus more on filling in the gaps with curiosity rather than conclusions. And we challenge things like naive realism, the illusion of asymmetric insight, and the dotted line dilemma. Pillar number 4 is seek the gray. And then we all know how many shades there are, right? But when you seek the gray, you're focusing on the nuanced nature of individuals and people, and that things aren't black and white. They aren't binary, 0 and 1 code. That it is really this place of how do I find the common ground and not middle ground? Because middle ground implies 50-50, and very rarely are things ever 50-50. But seeking the gray allows that common ground finding, right? That common denominator. And the last but not least is agree to respect. Notice I didn't say agree to disagree, but agree to respect means we formalize our plan to humanize the person in the midst of our disagreements. And there's several ways to do that, but agree to respect is a really, really powerful way that we lean into our choice, even if they don't agree to respect us back.
You know, the word that's coming to mind is unlearning. So just in agree to disagree, we could have had that in our programming for 30 years, right? And it's just an automatic thing. And this in all 5 of these, I can see there are key needs for unlearning. I don't know if you could bring some light there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you great examples of unlearning. One is in how we listen. Because I love when people say, oh, we just need to be better listeners. What does that look like, right? Like, we have to dive into this thing. And oftentimes, we come from a really good place when we're listening to people, right? And we call it the double Dutch style of communication, right? Because if people don't know what double Dutch is, it's like there's 2 ropes going whoosh, 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 and somebody waiting to jump in, like, wait a minute, I'm about to jump in. And this is what we're doing when we're listening and communicating with people. We're waiting to jump in. We're waiting to share our perspective, waiting for them to take a breath. And oftentimes, it's not because people are narcissistic, not because they're self-absorbed, but it's because they're trying to make connections and relate to people. And we've done that, right? That's one of the things we've learned. You just have to connect with people. You have to relate to people. But I want to caution us and help us to unlearn is because sometimes in our sincere and authentic desire to form connections, to relate to people, we end up taking control of conversations. Let me show you how this plays out. So imagine you went to this really good seafood restaurant and you're like, oh my gosh, I went to this amazing seafood restaurant. Our normal reaction in our relationship relating to people is, oh my gosh, but have you been to this one? Rather than diving in deeper in terms of what made it one of the best seafood restaurants you've been to? Or have you ever been to other ones? And so let me give you a practical way we've helped people lean into this. We created a tool called the Power of 3, where you listen at least into the 3rd level of the conversation. What we found in our research is that most people only listen to the power of 1 or the power of 2 because they can't wait to get back to themselves. I'm sure how this happens. So I'm talking to you, Nikki. I'm like, Nikki, how's your day today? And you're like, my day's fine. I'm like, my day's fine too. Power of 1. Nikki, how's your day today? My day's fine. Oh, what made your day fine? I heard this interesting bald-head speaker. I remember that bald-head speaker. It's power of 2, all right? The power of 3 is, how's your day today? I'm fine. Made it fine. I heard this interesting bald-head speaker. What made him interesting? Oh, he talked about the Circles of Grace Challenge. He talked about the power of 3. He talked about, is there anything else I should learn? And this is what happens is, if we at least dive into the 3rd level, it helps us get to a place, 1, where people feel valued, heard, and understood. I love this in our learning experiences when we do this. People walk away like, wow, like, I felt like I connected with them in less than 10 minutes in ways I haven't connected with someone in a long time. And it's because we've adopted the society's principles of distractedness and we haven't applied deep listening. And so I encourage you at work, at home, in your communities to consider practicing the principle of the power of 3. And if you don't know what else to ask, use the power of 3 words of tell me more.
So I'm writing down my own little Nikki to-do action items, if you will. And we talked about listening, right? Like, how can I be a better listener? Active listening, just being conscious there. Number 2, reflect. Just got off of this retreat. Wow, was that powerful? The things that came outside of me just because I took the time, right? 3, I asked you about unlearning because you gave examples where I'm like, so much of this is just, we are just programmed. So what is it that I need to unlearn? Number 4 is the habits I need to build. And when you were going through the 5, number 3 was curiosity. And the reason why I came with habits was I remember when I made being curious a habit, I wanted to, in every conversation, ask questions that just made me go deeper. And then now I'm loving like, ooh, the habit of curiosity is power of three. Power of three is the way to be curious. I love that. So good. So good.
Thank you.
Well, so Justin, this is so fantastic. I feel like there's many other things that we can do to like go deeper and elaborate, maybe do a collaborative, interactive discussion with some of our audience at some point. But when it comes to the work that you do, I'd love for you to just share, a little bit more before we head over to our lightning round and learn some fun things. Work meaningful. So the type of work that you're doing with organizations, can you just give us a little insight there?
Yeah, if we're at the intersection of meaningful work and inclusion. So sometimes we just do meaningful work, sometimes we just do inclusion, and sometimes it's a combination of the two of them. And I'll sum up and say that at the heartbeat is, how do we treat people better? How do we lead people better than the way we found them as leaders, as individuals, as team members? And I'll end at least this piece of it with just a practical aspect of agree to respect, because it's such a huge piece of the work that we do, and that fifth pillar. And some people say, well, what is that? How do you agree to respect somebody, right? It sounds good, but it seems more like a high view of something. Well, let me give you a practical way to lean into this. It's what we call a 3FA. It's that you can fully acknowledge people, period. You can fully acknowledge them whether you 100% agree, 100% disagree, or partially agree. And how can you do that? Well, Shan Zhao, Stanford professor, came up with this concept called thank you because. And in her research, she found that when people use thank you because, it actually left people feeling better and fully acknowledged, even in the midst of really challenging disagreements. So I'll give you a great example. Nikki, thank you because I've never heard it shared that way before. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. Or thank you because you mentioned 3 things and number 2 really stood out. I'm going to dive in deeper into that research and I'm going to come back to you and talk a little bit more about that. Or simply, Nikki, wow, this was a tough conversation for us to have. I want to thank you because you didn't have to have it with me, but I really appreciate you leaning in. Now, not once did I say I agreed with you, but we often conflate full acknowledgement for full agreement. And if you want to ask, Justin, how can I engage people with respectful disagreement or agree to respect in organizations and how it works? I encourage you to fully acknowledge people, to thank them for sharing their perspective, appreciate them for choosing to have the conversation. Doesn't mean that you agree, but it means that you value the humanity right before you. And that's the work that we do with Work Meaningful, is creating a space in our society and world where we value the humanity of people.
So good. And I think you have nailed the name of your business, Meaningful. It's right. Every single thing that we're doing here, it's like, if you just work backwards from why are we doing it, right? It's the meaningful. It's not the check the box of the open door policy, right? Because we want people to engage. We don't want to just throw the dates and times out there and no one shows up, which is what happens, right? We want the meaningful interactions, so we're going to go out and we're going to pursue it ourselves. So many great nuggets. I encourage you to check out Justin's book. And before you go, Justin, we have this lightning round. That's just a fun little way for people to get to know you. And then we'll make sure that everyone can get and stay connected. The first thing that we always ask, so we're 7 years into building this long list of favorite reads. Your favorite book of all time, a book that changed you. What book do you want to throw on our list?
Man, there's so many. I'm going to give you a book that's probably been shared before, but it's been transformative for me, and it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
That's my book.
That's
my number one book too. Oh,
it is such transformative, and it's so good. But because it's your book, I'll give you another quick one that people probably never heard of, called Dialogue, The Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs. And in the premise of the book, it's when I was doing my MBA, I loved my professor. I'm like, why are we reading this book? And it's because most of us come in with A, and we're trying to convince the other person of A, and the other person is B, and they're trying to convince us of B. And he asked the question, what if we created C? What if we looked for the C rather than trying to get allies when we go into these meetings about, hey, I need you to back me up in this meeting, right? Rather than asking, how do we find this C together? And C is often not 50-50. Again, it's that pillar 4, seek the gray. And I liken it to a drum circle, right? So as a Ghanaian, one of the things is the drum is very important for us. Now, there's a difference between the drum performance and the drum circle. And the drum performance, you're like, you're there just listening and watching. You're like, oh, this is great, right? But it's a monologue. When you go to a drum circle, every experience that you have for those who bring their drums, and you couldn't have the same experience without each and every single person's individual beat that is very different. But we hear a sound that is uniquely beautiful and never the same. That's the C, and that's why I love the book dialogue.
Oh, I love that. And I heard this in my mind. What if we find C together?
Yes.
Right? Set together. This is, and then it's like, hey, look at this collaboration at its finest. We are here. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so I hear you are an international traveler, but for a pretty unique reason. Tell us more.
So I've made a conscious decision to travel and trek or backpack internationally at least once a year. And it falls into the framework we created called 5SC squared, or 5 self-care strategy challenges. Is one thing I'll do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually for my self-care. And my annual one is international treks. And so it's allowed me to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, Machu Picchu, Patagonia, this upcoming holiday season doing the Lost City in Colombia, and preparing for a couple years out for Everest Base Camp. Let me be very clear, Base Camp, not Everest. I applaud those who've done Everest. I have little kids and I want to get back to them safely. So Everest Base Camp.
Have you ever seen any of those Everest movies?
I have.
Insane. Like, I'm like, what?
Nikki, that's what actually got me into hiking. I was on a plane in 2015 watching the movie Everest. And for some strange reason, watching that movie was like, oh, I want to do these international treks, because I started learning about things like K2 and then the 7 summits. And then I got into this and I realized my lane was non-technical climbs. So I don't plan on doing K2 or any of the ones which you have to use ice picks and all those things for. But the ones that require endurance, resilience, and a lot of patience. So yes, I have seen the movies, and that's what got me into hiking.
So, well, I commend that. That's what made me run the other way. But I'm like, that is only a movie in my world. Oh, that's awesome. Justin, you have a practice at the gym, aside from weights and aside from double dutch. Tell us more. What might we find you in the gym doing?
Dancing, 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 boom, boom, boom. I'm a dancing machine. Oh, Nikki. So I love dance. And so it's funny, right? The people they're so used to me now. That's why I can tell when people are guests at the gym, because they're like, what's this guy over here doing dancing? And it solves 2 things. One, it brings me joy. Like, I love dancing, and there's such a joy for me that comes from dancing, and it loosens me up. But 2, and this is the hidden reason that most people don't realize, I burn more calories in between sets by dancing. And so the person that's just sitting there and they're just lifting the weights, and they stop, they've decreased their heart rate, and they're not getting as much of a workout as I am when I'm dancing in between sets. And so when I'm on the Stairmaster dancing, it's a sight to see. I have some videos online about that. Or I'm just dancing in between sets, walking around the gym to keep my heart rate up. It's something that brings me great joy.
I love it. I love it. Justin, before we go, please let us know the best way to connect, stay in touch, or resource, whatever you'd like to share, because I know a number of people will be wanting to reach out.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is my favorite place. Look for Justin Jones-Fosu, F-O-S-U. And you can find the work that we're doing at workmeaningful.com. And it's just a lot of good resources and goodies and holiday guides about how to disagree and all that kind of stuff. That's been fun. So I love connecting with people because I want to leave people better than the way I found them.
Justin, thank you so much for joining Gut Plus Science and breaking down respectful disagreement. I think this is a powerful concept and something that we all can learn from. Who doesn't want that? We want respectful disagreements, and the way we all are living today, we need this more than ever before. And so I'm going to take your 5 pillars and break them down into my 5 truth you can act on actions for this episode. Number 1, make challenging your perspective a norm. Number 2, be the student. Listen and learn. And what if the new winning was learning, being the student? Number 3, cultivate your curiosity. Make curiosity a habit. I remember when I think it was Brene Brown that originally challenged this to a lot of us. And I adopted this whenever I get this like trigger feeling that is maybe like a judgment or, really just leading into my own. How can I just embrace the habit of curiosity? So cultivate your curiosity. Number 4, seek the gray, finding common ground and getting rid of that thinking, all right, let's meet in the middle, or finding middle ground, seek the gray. Number 5, agree to respect. And let's eliminate the let's agree to disagree. No, let's agree to respect and making that foundational effort in our conversations and our relationship building and just being with others. Thanks so much, Justin. We'll see you next time. We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.